What we're looking at here is the NetSuite native integration from the HubSpot side. So that's kind of where we'll start. First of all, here we have a whole bunch of configuration we can do. You can see the two objects that we'll be using in this sync will be companies and products. There will be a third object that we'll talk about later when we get there. But as for this part, you can affect the settings here. So the field mapping, if you just click into these, you have a whole bunch of configuration and field mapping here. You can turn on and off. The fields here automatically pull in from each system. So as you create custom properties, they show up here right away. And basically it's that easy. There's also some information here about what's syncing and if there's any issues with syncs. And yeah, so that's the configuration page here. Just as an example, we have a customer here in NetSuite that is going to be used in some demos. And we can see that this is the synced customer that has come through from the integration in HubSpot. Similarly, we have an items list that we'll be using, and we can also see that in HubSpot here. We can go ahead and take a look at one of those items and edit them to show that the sync happens in real time. We'll go ahead and come down and look at this t-shirt object. The purchase price right now we can see is $4.80. We can inflation that to $5.80. Well,
that's interesting. Andrew, do you have a way of zooming in on your screen a little bit? Can you do like a command plus just to zoom in a little?
Let's do that.
There we go. We'll put that a little bit
here. And then so back to the integration page. Essentially it will automatically pull that through. It does scans periodically and has some webhooks to see changes. But if you're ever just like really, like in a demo, for example, and want it to sync right now, there is a button here that you can go ahead and trigger a sync. So with that there, if I go back to the product list.
Andrew, can I ask a clarifying question real quick?
Yeah.
So just for anyone watching, items in NetSuite, is that the one-to-one match for products in HubSpot?
Yeah, so there's
sort of
NetSuite breaks it down a little more. So we're using inventory items, but there's also assembly items and a handful of other types of items. And you can sync those all separately into HubSpot item.
Nice. Okay.
Restrictions that we'll talk about how we can work around those, but essentially, you can do multiple.
And I think what you're like demonstrating here, right, is that like finance, when they're like setting the prices of products, right, they typically like to live inside of NetSuite and just do that one in NetSuite. The big problem is if salespeople are selling in HubSpot and they're using that product library, right, how are we getting those prices updated from what finance wants it to be? And that's sort of the sync that you're demonstrating here.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. You don't want to have to be updating multiple systems. So we can see here, I haven't refreshed, it's 480. And if I go ahead and refresh, actually I will send you in Bucky set you gave me as well. And check out, and it has increased to 580. So
inflation, baby.
Pretty simple. Yeah. So that's just a quick overview of the live sync. And I think Brian will take over from here. So,
And that's out of the box with the native HubSpot sync, right? It's like a pretty basic field mapping sync, right? And this is like really important as Brian kind of hops into what he's doing is like HubSpot quoting like this. Quote happily, like this is using the HubSpot data. It's not happening in a different system, right? So like it's really important to understand the connection there. It's like we're kind of riding off the back of that integration between HubSpot and NetSuite.
Yeah, and Max, I think a big point in kind of like a power selling feature for Quote Happily is it's native for HubSpot, right? We live within the deal record here in HubSpot, as you can see on the right-hand side. With our app, Quote Happily, it lives natively inside of HubSpot. The key thing here is you're managing one product library inside of HubSpot. So when you're doing NetSuite syncs and price updates, everything syncs to your native product library in HubSpot, and Quote Happily can leverage that native product library and do some pretty cool things inside of HubSpot to make that quoting experience more streamlined, more correct, or just to maybe just dummy proof the sales process in general. right?
Mhm.
Mm. Cool thing to know is we always use HubSpot LIAMs, and that means we output HubSpot LIAMs. So we're not managing a third-party data source of different LIAMs that we sell and then sync it back into HubSpot like some of the competitors in the space do today. We want to use our native product library and just make that quoting experience more dynamic, more customized, and just give a lot more flexibility inside the HubSpot portal to do all the things you wanted to do that HubSpot just doesn't do natively today.
Mhm.
So I'll get into a couple quick examples of like how Quote Happily works into HubSpot and some of the different features that Quote Happily has, and then we'll go into that example that Andrew changed that price in NetSuite, and we'll show how we can use that cost, add a margin to it with Quote Happily that is dynamic based on the cost update every single day you guys do on your products in NetSuite. So any quick questions there, Max, you want to highlight?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think kind of the big thing to drive home there is that the products and pricing that your team is using when they're building quotes and Quote Happily or HubSpot in this case, right, is directly informed by the pricing and products and properties that you set inside of NetSuite. So you're not doing the work twice, and you know that your sales rep always have the most like up-to-date pricing and data that they need to build quotes, even though the finance team is living in NetSuite.
Yep.
What a world we live in, Brian.
Quoting is very complex, and especially with all, the dynamic market conditions we're living in today, we got to make sure that we're quoting correctly so that we're a profitable business, right? Or updating our costs. We need to be able to update those costs in HubSpot and have those be leveraged into the quotes that we send to our customers, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we need to be a profitable business, and the only way to do that is between syncing NetSuite and HubSpot together, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to get into some very kind of more Quote Happily examples inside of HubSpot here to show kind of the power of the tool. And then we'll get into that NetSuite example where we use that dynamic cost that Andrew updated earlier and, do a calculated pricing margin on that cost to show how we present this to the customer. So in terms of our rules and approvals here, so when you guys are ready to build a quote, you're going to use our object here and click the create new quote button. Now, I'll start with a very simple example. Let's say we're selling some enterprise software. And Max, I don't know how many sales reps you've probably ever dealt with in your life, but when they sell
a lot,
when they sell solutions, right? We want to make sure that we're selling the right products with it, right? So when we're doing a certain, maybe an enterprise sale of an enterprise product that we sell, we always want to sell, for example, onboarding with it. And sales reps want to do everything in their power to not sell onboarding. But with Quote Happily, when you add an enterprise product, we can enforce another product to be sold with it, like onboarding, for example. So as you can see, when I add that enterprise quote, onboarding is completely added to the quote already for the sales rep. And we're calculating that onboarding fee based on a calculated formula where we're taking the total amount of software in the quote and we're multiplying it by a factor to get to our onboarding net price for this specific customer. Now, if I was to remove this onboarding fee, you'll see that Quote Happily is going to block me. And we want to enforce that onboarding is always sold with our enterprise products, right?
Mhm.
I hear this all the time in HubSpot where my sales rep forgot to sell this and forgot to sell that. And, these clients are expecting that onboarding. When you don't sell and charge for it, now you're going to have to renege expectations, readjust the quote, or just create that very non-linear experience with your customers that just start with frustration when you're getting into a new sale. How many times have you heard that, Max? Like if all the sales orgs you've ever worked in?
Yeah. And I think something like interesting about this example that you're showing here is like, how does this tie back to NetSuite, right? Well, let's remember that NetSuite integration, whether you're doing something custom built or you're using just the native one out of the box, right? That basic like field mapping, like that data sync is really important in examples like this, because let's say you're creating like a new product inside of NetSuite and it's a product that requires onboarding. Well, you could simply just have a field that says requires onboarding and have it be like a Boolean checkbox, right? And just build that inside of NetSuite. When that syncs over into HubSpot, what's happening here is we have a rule that we're looking at to see if the product requires onboarding. And then we're applying this onboarding thing automatically, right? So you could already have this stuff set up inside of HubSpot. And you've got finance person in NetSuite who's kind of like oblivious to all this, goes, here's the product, here's the price I'm setting. And yes, it requires onboarding. And because of that sync, this rule can still work, right? So they're playing together very nicely, even though they may not know the other thing exists, which is really cool. It's the power of HubSpot is the universal translator here. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just to highlight this onboarding fee, now when we add to the quote, you see it's going to be a dynamic onboarding fee, right? So it's taking the amount of software products on the quote, totaling them, and then running that calculated formula to get onboarding, right? So I was to add maybe another software product, like for example, our professional grade AI enforcer. You'll see that onboarding fee increase based on the new product I just added to the quote. And again, as I keep adding products to the quote, that onboarding fee is going to increase as I add those products. So we can create dynamic onboarding fees where we run custom calculations based on the products your customers are purchasing, so on and so forth. So one thing, we enforce the product, and we can also calculate the product for the sales rep. So we always know that we're selling the right products for the right price every single time.
Is that doing a roll up, Brian? Is that calculated field doing a roll up of like the AI products like on the quote essentially?
Yeah. So we can create custom rollups, where in this case, I'm actually running a rollup rule in Quote Happily where I have a total quote amount and it's looking at any of my clothing, apparel, maybe some managed services or software products. And then we always want to total those products in a quote. And then we want to use this rollup into a calculated price, which is in this case, our onboarding fee, where we add that total quote rollup to a calculated formula. And then we assign it to that onboarding fee in HubSpot to calculate that product.
Yeah. And like something like to just like highlight here too is like, again, these rollups and calculations, it's pulling data from your HubSpot products, the items that are showing up on the quote, maybe like a company that's associated to the quote, right? So if you have values that are syncing over from like account, do they call them, Andrew, they call them accounts in NetSuite, right?
Yep.
Is that the company record, right? So like anything that's like on that company record from NetSuite syncing over to HubSpot, right? That's all stuff that can inform different calculated fields and things like that you're doing too as well.
Beautiful. So another thing sales reps, besides forgetting to add the right products to a quote, another thing they love to do is add discounts to their products, right? So in HubSpot today, there's no native way to manage, the amounts that sales reps are discounting, where we can't create any conditional rules or maybe advanced approvals where based on the discount the sales rep requests, do we need to can they do it on their own, or do we need to send it to the sales manager, or maybe the sales manager plus the CFO in some examples? With Quote Happily, we can create very much a conditional rule set where based on the amount discounted, we route the approval to the right person based on, again, the discount field here in HubSpot. So to show you an example of that, we have an advanced approval where we tell Quote Happily, hey, I can let my sales reps discount just under 10%. So if I add a 9% discount here, you'll see that I'm still able to publish the quote. No one's going to stop me. We let our sales reps do that on their own, right? That's what we call an advanced approval. We're not going to waste someone's time to approve this. If we just want to let the sales reps do that on their own leisure, right? But if I go to a 15% discount, you'll see that what happens here is this published quote will submit to approval. And we have a conditional message here displaying to the sales rep, this will need to be approved by your sales manager. So they can't actually publish this quote and send it to the customer until it's been approved by their sales manager in this case. However, if we go to a 25% discount, maybe that message changes not only to the sales manager, but it also needs to be approved by the CFO because we've reached a discount threshold that's higher than what the sales manager is able to approve on their own, right? So this is where we can do a multi-level approval where it can be sent to not just one person in HubSpot, but we can also send it to multiple people in this case. And last but not least, when your sales reps get a little cheeky at the end of the quarter, trying to get that deal in at a discount that just wouldn't fly with any organization, I try to do like a 35% discount. We can just outright block a sales rep and say, hey, this is beyond the threshold that we're allowed to do on this product. And we can just block them outright and take away the publish or the approval functionality from them in this example. Now, Max, if you think about HubSpot today and how they run approvals, how much better is it?
Infinitely, right? If anyone's like not familiar, because like maybe, and maybe quite frankly, you haven't been quoting on HubSpot because you can't do advanced approvals, right? Like for anyone who's watching that doesn't know, like native quote approvals out of the box in HubSpot require you to get literally every single quote approved, right? And you can only have one person be the approver, right? which I think would probably drive a lot of people to like run approvals through, through NetSuite. Andrew, is that a thing? Are people like running quote approvals inside of like NetSuite pretty commonly, or using a different app for that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't seen that, but
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, so if you're only stuck with doing it in HubSpot, then right, the native one out of the box is going to be pretty bad. If you need any like layered sort of like complex level of approvals, or if you don't want to just have to approve literally every single quote that you create, right? So like advanced approvals by far is like one of my favorite features, and we've got a ton of videos and stuff about it that you can check out too. So cool.
Beautiful. So you're probably wondering, how the heck are we firing all these rules and outcomes for the sales rep? So I want to kind of take everyone through our rules engine, which quite happily in its inception was based on a master rules engine, right? We wanted to create rule-based outcomes for sales reps based on things they're doing inside of the HubSpot deal, company record, all these different things. And we want to have relative outcomes for them inside of the quote builder when they're building a quote for a particular customer, right? So for example, I had a couple of outcomes going on that quote today where, for example, if I wanted to block the enterprise discount here. So anytime we have an enterprise product and the discount percentage is greater than 30, we want to block the sales rep in this case and display this message to them, right? We also have those approval rules where, for example, if it's a enterprise approval and it's between 10 and 20%, I want to route this to a sales manager in this case. And this approval key will be important for something I show you later. So please remember this. And in the second example where the CFO needs to get involved, we're creating a separate discount threshold between 20 and 30, where we're requiring approval, and we can change this from sales to CFO approval. Now, based on these cues that we set on the approval rules we build in Quote Happily, we can leverage HubSpot workflows to then create these approval flows based on the approval queue that it met in Quote Happily. And we can send people down a various amount of paths where, in certain examples, based on the sales manager, it can go to one of two people, or maybe for our more complex approvals where it's a sales manager plus a CFO, we can route it to any one of our sales managers here and then route it to the CFO for final approval. So again, we're going to use all the native features that HubSpot already has today, and then just add that extra layer of functionalities and rule sets and conditions to route things to the right people every single time.
Yeah. And I think too, like a lot of the times when you see these like more complex approval workflows and you look at the branching logic, right? A lot of that branching logic is going to be based on data that's synced over from NetSuite, right? Whether it's something on the company level saying like, oh, if they're a gold level customer, like send it down this approval path, or if the margin amount is less than XYZ, synced over from NetSuite, like, send it down this path, right? Like all of that stuff can be informed by data that originates from NetSuite, which is really cool. And yeah, I got it confirmed here from Nick. Yes, you can do approvals in NetSuite. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say the native approvals in NetSuite go well beyond the functionality of the native approvals in HubSpot, which may stop you from doing your approvals in HubSpot. But now that is no longer the case. And if you do desire to be able to build complex approval processes in HubSpot that rely on data that originates from NetSuite, that is now your life and it is a reality, which is wonderful. So cool.
Yep. And the cool thing about our rules engine is we can leverage any object here in HubSpot. So for example, if you wanted to create a multi-level condition here on multiple objects, where we can use any property in HubSpot on these objects, whether it's a deal, whether it's a line item, and you can do any or functionality here, where if all these requirements are met, or if any one of these requirements are met, then we can have a relative outcome for the sales rep, which we feel like we have all the outcomes that most people are looking for today. And there's quite a few of them, but
we've exhausted the outcomes, I believe, at this point.
we can do a lot of different things to either make that sales process more streamlined and rule-based, making sure the right products are sold at the right prices and the right products are on a quote in general, or we can just maybe add products to the quote, make it really easy for the sales reps to do the right thing every single time, right? So everything is all built off the native properties, and the outcomes are all choosable here based on those properties being true or met inside of the HubSpot portal. Now, one particular rule set I think is really relevant for many people today is price books. Now, you might be selling to different customers out there in the ecosystem where maybe certain customers have specific pricing, right? So we have a tool called price books where that first price book I showed you was our direct to consumer price book where everything is kind of priced based on, the price on our website or just the standard price that we sell things at today. But I can also create a version of this price book for a reseller price book where we can have all the same products and SKUs in HubSpot, but we can override that cost to a percentage discount or maybe to new custom amounts that we can upload via CSV. Totally up to you. But simply, I can just override this entire book to a percentage decrease of 20%, let's say. And you'll see that reflected on the unit prices here on the right hand side. Now I can use a quote rule to set that price book based on a condition in HubSpot. So anytime we have a company type that is a reseller, I want to set the price book to our reseller price book in this case. So if I go back to that deal I was working on earlier and I go to my company record here and I change them from a prospect to a reseller, if I go and open up a new quote for this customer, you'll see that the price book assigned to me is going to be different this time. And we're going to have all of our products discounted 20%. Again, this is enforcing that if we have agreed upon pricing for certain customers, or we want to reward customers for their business, or we have partners we work with who get special pricing, with Quote Happily, we can set a price book for every single custom scenario you have to make sure the sales reps are only being presented with the right price for the right customer.
Dude, I still remember living in a world where we were creating the same product over and over and over again, just with different prices to get even like 1% of what that is. Yeah. Like if anyone like didn't like realize, like that's actually like changing the price of the unit price when it gets added to the quote. It's not like duplicating products, which like sends your, reporting and both in HubSpot and NetSuite into a tailspin, right? So yeah, price books are awesome.
Yeah. And we also have some other really cool features. We have a feature called prompt user, where you can essentially prompt users for different inputs about the customer to then automatically build a quote for a customer in this case. So I think in the industry, they call it guided selling, Max. I think that's what most people would know it
Term we
as.
keep hearing. Yeah.
So if I go to create a quote here in this case, you'll see that Quote Happily is going to ask the sales rep maybe a couple front end questions here, maybe like how many users does the customer have? How many devices do they have? How many software licenses do they need? Which type of software? Maybe do they want us to handle networking? Do they want 24/7 support? And then maybe is there a partner setting all this up? We have our partner Cisco here. Now, based on all these inputs, Quote Happily will automatically add the right lines to the quote. And we're also going to use those inputs that the sales rep gave us to automatically price out each and every one of these products, all based on the calculated pricing formula using the fields that we had asked the sales rep to begin with. So as you can see, this quote was completely built with custom amounts based on the inputs the sales rep gave. Now in the support product, we also have what we call table pricing. So on the support product, we offer 24/7 or maybe business hour support. And based on whatever the sales rep said, we can set the tier for this product to different levels. So if they said business hours, that price in HubSpot would change to 15,000, which would be reflected here on your unit price as well. So you can do table-based pricing where we can look up to different properties in HubSpot or tier levels to reflect multiple prices on one product here in HubSpot. And last but not least, we're calculating a dynamic cybersecurity fee. Again, kind of taking some of the unique aspects of this quote where we're rolling up the total quote in this case, and then we're timesing it by 15% to get to our cybersecurity fee, right? So from this end, we ask the sales rep the right things they need to build this quote. We build a quote for them. We add the right items. We run calculated pricing on those inputs. And then when we publish the quote, the cool thing about this is they actually have all these deal fields that will be saved on the deal record here in HubSpot. So you'll see that all the line items that we added all will come in as a line item here in HubSpot, as you'll see on the right-hand side. So we've added all those line items at their unique prices, but we also save those unique inputs from the sales rep on the deal record here. So if there's any downstream reporting you want to do to understand how you got to the pricing you got to, you can then reference these deal fields later.
Or if you want to trigger automation based on it too. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do a ton of different things with it, but I think it's the cool thing is we take what was probably a longer process to build a quote, and we can do it all very quickly by just
yeah, like imagine building that line item by line item in the old quote editor. Like I'd quit my job if I'm being so honest. Anyway,
beautiful. So with that, let's get into back into the NetSuite side of things. So with Quote Happily, we showed you kind of some of the rules and automations that we can do with the quote building experience. But now let's go back to what Andrew was doing earlier when he updated the cost of a product in NetSuite. And we can show how Quote Happily can then leverage that cost. We can add margins and then create rules around the quote building experience. So in this example, I'm going to create a quote here, and I'm going to add a collection, which is maybe a standard clothing and apparel quote for a customer, right? Now, you'll see when I add these products to the quote, Quote Happily is going to load some custom calculated formulas using our NetSuite costs in this case. So if you remember earlier, Andrew changed the cost of a product to $5.80 because of inflation, which again, we're reading that property and your product library in HubSpot, and we're using a calculated pricing formula to then take that cost, add a enforced margin, which would then reflect a unit price as so. So we can run these calculated margins here to then reflect it on your costs. Now, in this case, we also maybe have editable margins where maybe we want to set a minimum margin for the sales rep, but maybe they want to sell it at a higher price. For example, if I wanted to sell at 85, I can. But if I wanted to sell it low, for example, lower than 30, I can maybe do like a 28% margin in this case, which will maybe drive an approval. Or if I go below 25, which is our absolute minimum, for example, like a 15% margin, you'll see that in this case, I'm going to be actually blocked because this margin is not acceptable based on our minimum, right? So we can run all these custom calculations. And the way this works is in calculated pricing here, for example, if we go to any one of these calculated formulas here, we can basically look at enforced margin pricing here. So we can take the NetSuite cost that Andrew synced over from NetSuite, and this can be done. What's the frequency, Andrew? What are the frequency possibilities for NetSuite syncing here?
Yeah, it can be triggered based on updates. So really just instantly. Yeah.
So as soon as that product is updated in NetSuite, we can grab that live NetSuite cost. We can add a formula to that NetSuite cost to imply a margin that we enforce in the product library in HubSpot. And then we can have the outcome be the unit price in this case, which would be NetSuite cost plus the margin we want to enforce here in Quote Happily.
So you can have a completely custom calculated pricing where all the inputs are dictated by stuff that people are punching in NetSuite.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all comes right to your native product library, and we can import all the line and properties we want, like the NetSuite cost, for example, right? We can grab that NetSuite cost and insert it into this formula, and then we can have your unit price be custom, all based on this formula.
The traumatic flashbacks I'm having to be a solutions engineer when people are asking me if this is something we can do, and I am just trying to tell them no in so many different ways without saying no. I wish I had this. Yeah,
absolutely.
Crazy.
So if we go in and if we run some examples here. So now that we have the quote all built, and then we can add some quantities. Now you'll see that we actually also sync over the live inventory from NetSuite as well, which they pass over into the product library in HubSpot. So for example, if I have 25 inventory left, we're also giving the sales rep a quick notice here, like, hey, you added t-shirts, it's low in inventory, check with fulfillment before you build this quote sort of thing. So you can notify sales reps of inventory levels if it's too low sort of thing. Or we can, if I try to do 26 here when the inventory is 25, we can just then block the sales rep because we don't have enough stock left to fill this. So we can do a lot of cool things using all the native syncing properties from NetSuite to then make sure the sales reps are selling within the bounds that NetSuite is allowing.
Okay. So if anyone like missed that, right? Like your quoting process is getting dynamically guided and shaped by the inventory levels that you're tracking in NetSuite, but you're building the quote in HubSpot. Like this is not something that has been really possible without an insanely deep, super custom integration before, right, Andrew? I'm sure you guys have like painstakingly built something like this in the past from scratch, right? But to be able to kind of do this out of the box with a native integration is pretty nuts.
Yeah. So once we've added the quantities of the different things that we want to sell based on our new unit costs using the margin here in Quotivity, we also added a shipping fee, which takes in the total products in the quote, and then we're timesing that by 15% to get our shipping fee in this example. So again, we're enforcing that product to be sold, and we're also auto calculating it for the sales rep based on a custom formula in Quotivity. And when I'm ready, I can publish this quote. And then I will close one this deal, and then Andrew will show you how this order comes across over into NetSuite. So once I have the deal updated here in HubSpot, you'll see that we reflect the deal amount. We have all the line items that we added here in HubSpot, all reflected as so. And now I can close one this deal, and Andrew can show you the NetSuite side of things once the workflow is run. So a couple of things while Andrew's looking that up quickly. I will want to highlight that, again, we are always outputting HubSpot line items here. So if you guys are running workflows or anything based on things you're doing in HubSpot, you don't need to change anything. We still run the same sort of deal process. So again, we want to highlight the nativeness of this tool, that we're still using all the native features, but we're just adding that extra layer of functionality and flexibility for the way you guys want to price.
Yep. And the other thing too is like reporting, right? This is like a big thing there's like a big disconnect that happens when you're using like quoting tools outside of HubSpot, is like you lose that line item fidelity on the deal record, and thus any sort of like reports you're trying to build in HubSpot based on line item data, you can't do, right? But like, keep in mind, you're sort of getting like a double whammy of reporting here, right? Because inside of HubSpot, you have the line items. So of course, HubSpot's native reporting works. Also, HubSpot just launched a whole bunch of brand new line item revenue reporting features that everyone should go check out at some point, right? But keep in mind, this is going to get synced over into NetSuite, right? So you're going to have that same fidelity level of reporting on the NetSuite side too as well. You're not losing out on anything since you're quoting in a third party, not quoting in a third party app. I mean, Quote Happily is third party, but it's as first party as it gets because we're literally just using HubSpot data, right? We're like a native third party. We're weird. I don't know. We're strange.
We put so it attaches the customer, increments an order number with some data information. And then the items come through as line items. This, the amount shows up here. And this is where we'll get into some of the differences with the bundle, but essentially, every item in the quote will show up as a separate line item in this.
So another Quote Happily feature is setting up bundles here in HubSpot. So for example, if we want to build a server for a customer where our header product in HubSpot is a server box, that's the starting product. And then we have all these different categorized options that are included with this product, where I need to select one of these two processors, maybe one of these two server boards, maybe select a cooling system for it, and all these different components that we can select and swap right inside of a quote in HubSpot. What this is really doing is creating kind of like a one configured product in HubSpot with that sort of parent-child relationship that people are looking for. So when we add this product to a quote, you'll see that when I go to my price book here, I can select a bundle, which will allow me to build a custom product for a customer. So if I go to my bundles here, we have the server box, add to the quote. Now, Quote Happily is going to load all the configurable options for this server and all the different options that they can swap between. So for example, once the server box is loaded, I can go in and select all these different things and swap products from one another. So for example, the processor, if I wanted to switch this to an AMD EPYC, what's going to happen here is a couple of things. I'm going to get blocked because we cannot sell an AMD EPYC without an ASR rock board. So Quote Happily will do that product dependencies within the servers that you're building, where if we have things that need to be sold together or can't be sold together, we can run dependency-based rules on this bundle. So I can go ahead and update my server board now to an ASR rack here. I can maybe change my cooling system to an air cooling system. I can select the cable kit that I'm looking for, and the server rack always comes included. And then I could have maybe add some products where maybe I was going to add some braided cooling tubes, but since I have an air cooling system, that doesn't make sense because braided cooling tubes are only sold with a liquid cooling system. So again, same sort of dependency rules where I can go in, make that swap, and now I'm going to be able to publish a quote. So we built a bundle with all the configured options of the sales that the customer was looking for. I can publish this quote. And then we'll do the same process here where you'll see how the line items come into HubSpot. And I can quickly go in and review those line items of all the things that I sold. So you'll see that display right here on the right-hand side of the deal. We update the deal amount, and then I can go in and close one, and we can run that NetSuite workflow.
It has a different customer, like I just explained. And yeah, otherwise the line items will look the same or similar, different rates.
We user errored hard.
Yeah, and well, and that's one of the things about the out of the box one is you don't really know what's going on under the hood. So the difference between, so I'll show you what the difference was quickly. So I'll look for the example in the bundles here. So it's this company primary tag. So I just added a new company without that, and it worked. So
Sweet.
With a custom solution, you could have, rules and make it however you want, where primary and non-primary are treated differently.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was just a shot in the dark with that. Fixed it. So, I'll show you the enrollment of this next one, the bundles deal. I'll just see if it had the same issue. It didn't. So now if we go back to the list here in NetSuite, just for reference, since I didn't really get to mention it, this page here is the way that we're syncing the deals over to sales ordered in NetSuite. So we have it on a workflow instead of the standard sync because we can confirm that the record actually enters the deal stage close one, and then we just have some control over what happens. And
that's instead of blanket syncing everything.
Yeah.
Nice.
So this way you can wait till it's really finalized before you sync it over, so you don't get messy trial data or edited data in NetSuite. So here we have the bundles at the bottom here. View a little quicker now that it's been warmed up. And yeah, so here we go. This is the bundles, and we can see all of the items for the server rack here.
Yeah.
And it flattens them out because, again, that's one of the limitations of the out of the box sync is it'll sync all of the line items, but it won't show necessarily that they're bundled. It'll put them all here. And that's just one of those cases where with a custom integration, you could have them put into an item group or something like that, or a BOM if you actually have to go through a manufacturing process.
Yeah. And I think bundles is also like a really good example of like why Quote Happily serves as a really good companion to a NetSuite integration into HubSpot. Because like, if you think of that native product sync, like that's just stuffing products into the product library, right? And if you're using like just HubSpot quoting out of the box, you could just pick and choose whatever products you want out of that product library. When reality would be is like, some of those products don't work together, or you wouldn't sell them together, or there are rules around how you can bundle them together, right? However, native HubSpot's quoting is not going to let you set that up. So Quote Happily lets you build those bundles and those rules and everything to match the way those products are supposed to be sold together or not together, right? Or with each other, however it may be, right? So you can match whatever that logic is that you would desire from the NetSuite side. All right, cool.